right?
That's another great question.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, and ships at sea, and all that other stuff. Welcome to Addressing Gettysburg's Ask a Gettysburg Guide. I believe this is number 109, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's live. It's live, which is very exciting for all of you, of course. We are talking to Jim Hessler today, our friend, one of our favorite guests, one of your favorite guests. There he is, Jim Hessler. Welcome, Jim.
Everyone, how are you?
Also joining us.
Thank you for having me.
From his, you're welcome, Jim. Thanks for doing this. Back from his transatlantic month-long trip to Ungaland is our friend Mikey B. He's sitting over here to my right, and he's going to be monitoring the comments today. So he's going to let me know when there's a super chat to read. So there you go. Mikey B, welcome back.
England was amazing, but this is the only place in the world I'd rather be.
I love it. I love
it. Man, it's no Canada. Let's just get that right off.
No, absolutely not.
No, it's not. You know, and I'll tell you something. When you're rejected here, that's where you go. And in the back, running the cameras and all that other jazz is the great Court Micker. Hello, Courtney. How are you?
Doing well.
Good. Welcome.
Doing well.
And so today, first of all, before we even get started, I have to tell you, Jim and I went. When was that? March?
I was thinking January, but sometime in the late winter.
It was cold.
Spring. Yes,
it was cold.
Very cold.
We went to Pat McGuire's house. If you don't know, Pat McGuire has a show called the History Things Podcast. If you're a patron, you probably are familiar with him because he comes on at the end of the year and we just do a goof around show. And I go on his show every now and then. And when I was on for my annual visit this year, we were talking afterwards, and he asked me if I wanted to do a Gettysburg show, and I said no. I already do that, and I'm not a historian, and this is not what I do with this show. I talk to historians, and so I said, but how would you like it if I got Jim Hessler to join me, and we'll do one about the Battle of the Little Bighorn? And he said, ooh, that would be great. And so Jim and I went and did the show. 4 hours.
Yeah, it was a Silence of the Lambs type of experience. We're in the basement studio for 4 hours.
Right.
Please, can I get out?
Right.
And we just kept going and going.
And Pat was like, it rubs the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again. And we were like, please, I'm hungry. So we had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. You had fun. Eventually, once you realized what it was like.
Oodles of fun. Loads of fun.
Yeah. We had a great time. And so I shared the link on Patreon, and I want to read you some of the comments from the patrons here. Rich Snyder says, I love when Matt does these crossover shows. Great things, including chaos occur. Okay, that was about me. Mike Tyson 2007 says, listening now, 1 hour in, absolute joy to listen to. All right.
Nice.
Joe Korber says, awesome listen. I have to seek out this Son of the Morning Star book, which was highly recommended.
Heartily recommended.
And this one here, Mike Tyson comes in again. I guess he finished listening, and he said, Jim and Matt, my dream team, could listen to them all day.
Isn't that...
That's amazing.
Huh?
Bravo, Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Exactly.
Bravo.
So there we go.
It's that undeniable chemistry we have on camera, on mic, in a bar stool, wherever.
And born out of a blood feud... Yes. We've become good friends and good, what would you call it? Co-host, companions on the journey. We're companions on the journey through this historic.
Companions sounds a little squishy to me. We're
peers. Some people would use the word peers.
Peers or colleagues.
We're podcasting comrades.
Comrades. There you go.
In digital content creation.
Yes,
right?
The digital sickle and hammer comrades type of a thing. So there we go. Yeah.
It is crazy. You mentioned our bloodied background
Feud.
history. You know, in the past, I would sort of make a token, one appearance a year on this show.
Yeah.
This is like my 4th time now, and it's only June.
Well, you've retired, so you've got more time now, which I think is great because we can have you on more often.
All right, well, let's do that.
And the audience likes that, and I like that, so it's good. Okay, so first of all, if you've got this at home, Sickles at Gettysburg by our guest Jim Hessler, actually James A. Hessler, if you will. The stuff we're talking about today could be found in chapter 3, but we're kind of parsing it a little bit more, exploring it a little bit more today. So if you've got that at home, then you can. I wouldn't read along because we're not doing it that way, but you can read it for further information and whatnot after the show. Also, we got some questions that were submitted by our patrons, and we're going to do this a little different today because most of the questions that they submitted were basically restating the premise of the show, the title of the show. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the questions all off right now so you can get that, and we're going to answer all of these questions. So what that means is super chats of $10 or more, they're going to go towards defraying the cost of feeding the crew here tonight.
The pizza was fantastic, kids.
Yep.
And the lobster wasn't bad.
Yeah. The lobster wasn't bad either.
Really nice this time.
Well, lobster pizza is really good, right? Lobster humidor.
Yes.
Was it?
Yes.
Is it humidor?
Humidor.
Oh, that's the thing you put a
Can I make a note to future guests? If future guests like Louis Trott, for example, are listening, when they say dinner is served at 6 o'clock, get here at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
I was 15 minutes late. I got too cold.
It was like ravenous dogs when that pizza came in. We were all hungry.
Yeah, the water though in the red cup is delicious.
It's straight out of Stevens Run.
Yeah, at least,
which is right over there.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of rain, so it's pretty fresh. It wasn't standing
delicious
for very long. So the questions that we're going to answer today, one of them is from Joe Denise. He says, how did Dan Sickles take the outcome of the battle, and meaning Chancellorsville, and did that come into play on his maneuvers of his corps on July 2nd, 1863? That's really what we're getting into today. So that's that. Rob Fry had a couple questions. He said, my impression has always been that the Battle of Chancellorsville had a lasting impact on Sickles going into the Gettysburg campaign. Did the loss of Hazel Grove and the high ground contribute to his forward movement on July 2nd? Again, title of the show.
Okay.
And his other question, was Sickles able to gain any valuable intelligence from his action with Jackson's rear guard on May 2nd before the flank attack?
Yeah, it's not that.
These questions are getting really off the rails.
It's not that kind of show, is it?
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Right.
It's just a crazy audience. Or did it go unheard because Hooker was convinced that Lee was retreating? And 3, what were Sickles' feelings towards Hooker after the battle?
Okay.
Colin, that's a Gaelic spelling, and I don't know how to pronounce it. Colin O'Cauley. I'm sorry for mangling your name, Colin. If you were in Sickles' shoes while he still had to,
wink, wink,
would you have advanced to the Peach Orchard? Now, that one, we'll all take that. We're going to start with that. And then Chuck Critchfield says, I have read multiple letters and diary entries from May 1864 that comment on Sickles' presence during the early stages of the Atlanta campaign. Sickles is usually cited riding with Sherman, his 3 army commanders or corps commanders. Why was Sickles in Georgia, and how long did he stay? So that has nothing to do with the topic, but why don't you just answer that right away, since he took the time to ask us. Can you just give a short answer to that one?
Answer that one right away?
Yeah.
So, at this point, I seldom give short answers, but, we'll do the best.
As short as you can. Hessler short.
Off the top of my head, I don't know exactly how long Sickles is in Georgia, but you got to remember, in general, after Gettysburg, after 1863, Dan Sickles is a man looking for an assignment. George Meade has prevented him from coming back to the Army of the Potomac, so Sickles is pestering Lincoln, he's pestering Stanton, he's pestering Washington. Give me stuff to do. And so I know at one point, and again, forgive me, I don't have the exact dates in front of me, but I know a tour of Georgia, an inspection tour of Georgia is included in that, and part of that would include visiting his old buddies Hooker and Dan Butterfield, who were in that theater at that time. So that's what he's doing there. Again, forgive me, I don't have the exact dates, that he comes and goes on that, but that's what that's.
And to be fair, there's a precedent for that, right? People like Burnside, Hooker, even Howard are still, despite their failures in other places, are still getting commands and successful.
There's a war going on.
Yep,
they need people.
And they need guys.
Rich Snyder, I just want to thank you for the $20 super chat, and he says to feed the guest and hosts. Thanks for doing this. You're very welcome. Thank you for your contribution, sir. Okay, so let's start by all going around the room. We're going to ask that question that if we were in Sickles' shoes at the time, I guess he made the decision. Would we have gone out to the peach orchard? Let's start in the back with Courtney so he doesn't feel lonely. Court, what do you say? What say you, sir?
No.
You would not. ¿Por qué?
No.
Why?
I wouldn't. I was actually out there last night walking the line, and honestly, standing there in that position and looking back to Cemetery Ridge, I don't know that I, just in that anecdotal moment, thought it would be a better position to be in than back over on Cemetery Ridge.
Okay. All right. Fair. It's a fair answer. And I don't know why your microphone is humming like that.
I don't either.
But we'll figure that out. Okay. How about you, Mikey? Whatever your friggin' name is. Mike, how about you, sir?
Oh, it's my turn.
Yes, sir.
Not Jimmy or Bob. Or
neither.
I didn't know we were answering questions. Yeah, I don't know if we can ever give that answer the question a proper answer. I think part of living in the future with hindsight is knowing how the battle plays out, is knowing what ended up being important at that time.
Well, let me add something to it, so maybe make it a little easier for you. Okay, knowing yourself, if you were in Sickles' position, A, would you even get antsy and want to take that position? And if so, would you ask permission? And when you are denied permission, would you keep trying? And then when you're continuing to be denied, would you just say, F it, I'm going to do it myself? Would you? So how would you behave?
I would say I think it's perfectly reasonable and understandable for someone. If you go there and stand, being a Burling Brigade guy, if you go to the Trossel Farm and you look up at, those are heights in front of you.
Yeah.
I can understand where that happens. And then when your cavalry on the left is taken away and it's not replaced, I can understand where you get a bit antsy. And you're just a month removed from what we're talking about today. Even though his corps wasn't the one that got flanked, that happened to the Union 11th Corps.
Right.
Lee is known for these little coming through the woods. And then suddenly when he runs into them, when the 3rd Maine and the sharpshooters run into someone, he's like, this isn't happening again. So I can understand it. So would I have done it? I don't know. In hindsight, of course, I'd go, oh, no, that's a stupid idea. But I think it's perfectly understandable from a strategic and history point of view as to why it happened.
All right. And then we'll save the best for last. So Jim will go last. I'm going to say, if I were in that position, I would have done it because I, like Sickles, have a problem with authority. And I am a hothead sometimes. Yes. And if I get an idea in my head and I'm convinced I'm right, I have to do it. And so I absolutely, even though I've been very clear in my criticism for him for disobeying orders.
Now that you mention it, you have been over the years. Yeah.
But I still would, I would be more like him. And I think that's why I'm so hard on him, because I see myself in him. And I don't like that.
A little self-loathing in there?
Yeah, a lot of self-loathing.
Okay, all right.
There's plenty of it, yeah. So I think it's, I think I would do it. Yeah,
right.
I would.
And that's why you're self-employed, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't work for
I can't,
else.
Yeah. God forbid I ever lose this, because now anybody that hears this will never hire me. So, but go ahead.
Mike was starting to go down the same sort of road that I would when I think about this. And again, just for the sake of kind of completing my own thoughts on it, we all deal with echoes of past laughter. The psychology of things we have dealt with in our own background. And so the whole point of today's show, of course, being what did Sickles experience at Chancellorsville, like an exploding IKEA bag. It's the idea of how did that influence Gettysburg? And none of us can recreate that.
Right.
But I think, the temperament of Sickles, the aggressive, the Matt Callery-like aspect of Sickles' personality, I as much as I hate to admit it about myself, I'm probably the opposite. I'm a rule follower, not a rule breaker. And I tend to think as long as General Meade made those instructions clear enough to me, which, some of the Sickles haters don't want to accept, and maybe it just wasn't that clear to Sickles. But I'm a rule follower, and I tend to think I would have done what I was told, as much as it pains me and my own self-loathing to admit that.
Yeah, I get you. Real quick, Court, are we recording? Please hit record. Thank you kindly.
Do we have to do all this over?
No.
All right.
Just in case
I say we try and do it over.
You want to start again?
We can do
All right, here we go.
Right?
No, we're not doing it again. Okay, Court? Court? Can you give me... Oh, sorry. Give me a thumbs up. There's something with your mic going on. Okay, thank you. All right, so now... let's get on then with this analyses that we're doing here. Okay. All right. So first of all, let me ask you: when you were asked to do this, was this your idea, or was this something that we had on our list?
No, that's a good point. For particularly too, and look, I know obviously anybody who's tuning in right now and is submitting questions is presumably interested. But for anybody out there who is wringing their hands, clutching their pearls, here is Hessler again talking about Sickles. This was your idea. You guys reached out to me and said there was a groundswell of support among the Addressing Gettysburg listeners for more Sickles. So this was your guys' idea.
Okay, good. So, but this is a good question because as long as I can remember, guides have been saying, and he's got fresh in his mind just 2 months before, Battle of Chancellorsville at Hazel Grove, when he lost that high ground. He was ordered away from that high ground and blah, blah, blah. And to me, I never questioned that. I assumed that had to be written somewhere.
Right.
Is it?
The thing is, and you're right to be questioning that and to understand that this has been in the Gettysburg mythology for as long as any of us can remember. The challenging part about this and the whole Hazel Grove thing is none of us have ever found, when I got started and before I got started, guys like Rich Core were into this and whoever was before Rich, as far as I know, nobody has ever found in writing where Sickles said, I did it because of Hazel Grove. So if he didn't say it, where does it come from? For example, Edward Porter Alexander in his military memoirs, which I think off the top of my head is the 1907 edition. Edward Porter Alexander in military memoirs says Sickles probably had the benefits of Hazel Grove in mind when he moved forward at Gettysburg. Now, as you and I have talked before, words matter.
Yeah.
And notice the word probably was in there. So even then, you don't get a conclusive, hey, I hung out with Dan Sickles at a reunion and he said, this is why I did it.
Right.
But when you talk about, is it actually written anywhere? It ain't written anywhere from Sickles. Sickles uses other Chancellorsville examples, but Alexander, I know at least in military memoirs, uses it. Off the top of my head, maybe Doubleday in his memoirs mentions it as well. I can't remember, but I know Alexander does.
I'm glad you pointed out the word probably and that words matter, because they do. And there's always, I think people will see a statement like that and they'll say, oh, look at right here. It says he thought of it.
Exactly.
And they don't whether it's they don't really understand what probably means. Like, it's not definitely, it's probably. There's a good chance of it.
Yeah.
But it's not for certain. But they want it to be that.
In this age, and get me up on camera here, right? In this age when we're doing this and everything's got to be short and, IDK and LOL and that sort of thing. We forgot an era that these guys lived in where words matter. And, the power of the language and how these guys wrote was something. So, if Alexander... and you got to remember, too, Alexander hung out with Sickles at reunions, at veterans gatherings. I got a photo in my archives somewhere, the two of them at Chancellorsville together. I forget whatever year it was. You'd think if Sickles would have turned to him at some point and said, yeah, Porter, it was Hazel Grove,
Right.
But the best we get out of Alexander is, well, he probably did. And I think that could be as much Alexander the artillerist comparing the pros and the cons of the two, Chancellorsville, Gettysburg,
And, like,
saying, as an artillery guy, this makes sense to me.
Words matter so much, and the way things are phrased. A great example was Alan Thompson's book, In the Shadow of Round Tops, which I thought the beginning of that book was fantastic.
Yeah.
And he talks about McLaw's letters and, how he found, something McLaw said about the timing of or where he was on July 2nd, how that was just rehashed again and again because he said it. It was in his letter.
Yeah.
But then he found the original letters where he edited out words like probably
Right.
and about, to give it that power behind it. So like you said, someone says probably, then someone else regurgitates what Alexander said as Sickles was thinking of this, and now suddenly it's in the lexicon, it's in the what everybody talks about.
Now the flip side of that is, let's say I'm posting something on social media today and I'm responding to a comment or something like that. And I might type it up and it's sort of a first impression, might have a lot of flowery probablys and maybes and shows. And then I kind of read that and might say, no, that's not nearly as strong enough as I mean. So the probably comes out and the maybe comes out and the should have comes out. So yeah, it's hard. Ultimately, we don't know what motivates somebody to write it the way they write it, but it is instructive. Alexander says probably.
So, but going back to Alexander, and he writes probably, do we know, did they ever interact with each other post-war?
They did. As I mentioned, I think a couple minutes ago, we know we have indications of them in reunions together and photos together. I think there's one of them, them being Alexander and Sickles, in a group together here at East Cemetery Hill. If I remember correctly, they're both in that one. But I know
what was that, Court?
I've seen that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know there's one in as I said, I've got one of them in Chancellorsville with the group. So absolutely, unequivocally, I probably a few anecdotes, including both of them in my book. So there's no doubt they interacted. And I'm not going to say probably. There is no doubt they.
So then they could have.
You would think.
Had a conversation where Sickles said that to Alexander.
Right.
But for whatever reason, Alexander, if I'm right on that, for whatever reason, Alexander decides to not be definitive about it, and he just says probably.
Yeah.
Sickles isn't shy about defending himself and his actions.
No.
So it would be
I would imagine
incredibly rare that he mentioned it to just one person who then happened to...
good point.
And honestly, if this was what he was thinking, I imagine as he's laying there in a hospital talking to Lincoln and bashing Meade, he would have taken the time to say, oh, by the way, I was thinking about Hazel Grove and that bastard Hooker. Yeah. All right. Go ahead.
I had a there.
Voice is throwing all over the place.
Just to kind of though take on Michael's point there. You're right. You're absolutely right. The idea that Sickles would just be like the one guy. Hey, Alexander, come over here. I'm going to let you in on a secret. There's no way. And this is part of one of the themes in my Sickles book, going beyond chapter 3. When he comes back again and again, when he writes, when he gives speeches, when he talks about it, yes, he talks about Chancellorsville. He's very vocal. Chancellorsville impacted my decisions, and I did it because I wanted to avoid Chancellorsville. What, though, he doesn't say is Hazel Grove. And maybe as we get into conversation, we'll talk about what he does say.
Yeah, well, then let's start doing that then. Let's get into Hazel Grove then. So Hazel Grove is part of the Chancellorsville battlefield.
Yeah.
Just for, well, I'm not going to assume everybody knows about the Battle of Chancellorsville. Give us a very short synopsis
of the very short
of the Battle of Chancellorsville. With a focus on Sickles and his experience there.
How can we do this?
Shortly.
Very short.
Yeah.
Chancellorsville, late April, early May, 1863. Joe Hooker, Sickles' buddy, Hooker, commander of the Army of the Potomac, comes up with a plan to basically try to pry Robert E. Lee out of his Fredericksburg defenses. And Hooker comes up with what is a fantastic maneuver strategy where he's going to send 3 corps, which initially is going to be, the 12th Corps, the 11th Corps, and I think George Meade's 5th Corps, kind of across the river to get around Lee's flank and into his rear, while there's that word again. Yeah. Into Lee's rear.
Sounds painful.
While Sedgwick and the 6th Corps are going to keep Lee's front pinned down at Fredericksburg. And that's basically Hooker's Hooker's plan for Chancellorsville. I'm sorry, folks. Paintbrushes or something are falling over here on the
Screwdriver.
So that's basically Hooker's plan for Chancellorsville. As far as Sickles is concerned, Sickles in the Third Corps, because by this point we should mention Chancellorsville is Sickles' first battle in command of the Third Corps. And Sickles and the Third Corps are kind of coming in what I'm going to call a second wave here, coming in behind the 12th and the 11th and the 5th Corps. He's going to kind of come in behind them and join in this force that is moving behind Lee's army. So that's the basic plan. Of course, Robert E. Lee and his lieutenants get wind of this and develop some fantastic countermeasures, dividing the army, sending Jackson and McLaws and other guys out to sort of stop Hooker's attacking force, while Jubal Early and other guys keep Sedgwick pinned down in the Fredericksburg area. But ultimately, these moves are what lead to the Battle of Chancellorsville, with the heaviest fighting May 1st, May 2nd, May 3rd, 1863. That a good overview?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a pertinent question from Six Questions Lentz. He said,
The great 6 questions, Lentz?
Why is Lentz not in the studio? Where is he tonight?
He
probably
fell and
getting
got
ready
hurt.
to watch the Colorado Rockies lose another game of baseball. It said, can you compare and contrast Hazel Grove and the Peach Orchard from a terrain value perspective? And what value does each have as an artillery platform? Additionally, he also made a great comment if Alexander is one of the few commanders that utilized both Hazel Grove and the Peach Orchard.
He is, and we can mention that. So, okay, so from that synopsis, do you want me to go right to Hazel Grove?
Yeah.
Hazel Grove is May 3rd, and you got all the stuff in between.
Well, okay, but let's get to Hazel Grove with the line of questioning
Good,
here.
okay, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so Jackson has been split off from Lee, the plan is, and he's going to go down around, south and then west and north or something like that?
So for the May 2nd flank attack, basically, yeah.
So Sickles, where's Sickles when that's happening? Because Sickles Corps is where?
Yeah, okay, so...
Okay.
Folks, if you have Sickles at Gettysburg in front of you, there is a map in Chapter 3 that shows this.
Which, let me pull it up. I got a scan of it for you there.
Because, Matt, we've established in our past appearances, people love maps.
They do love
they
maps.
Love good
they
maps.
do love maps.
We're visual learners.
That's right.
So I think Matt is pulling it up here. I'm going to
pulling it up.
Give him
Here
a
we
minute
go.
to do that.
All right, go ahead, Court.
There we go.
There we go.
Perfect. So there you go. You guys see that on screen. That's a map that I had Brad Godfrey do for me many, many years ago when we did the Sickles book. Now it's high level. It's at basically at the core level on the Union side. But what you guys can hopefully see on that map, you see hopefully very clearly labeled Jackson's March kind of down at the bottom of the page. Be careful because you're kind of knocking Jackson off the screen here.
There we go.
But you see Jackson kind of moving essentially from in front of the Union Army's left flank around to get around the right flank. Some reconnaissance has told Lee and team that the Union Army's right flank is in the air along the Orange Plank Road. So as Jackson is moving across that front, which you guys can see on the map, Sickles and the Third Corps are almost, as fate would have it, right in the middle of the Union line. And you see 2 blocks there for Berry, which would be Hiram Berry's division, Emil Whipple's division.
Mr. Whipple.
And then actually down in front of them would be David Birney's division. So really we got all 3 Third Corps divisions there. We're right in the center of the line. And the problem is this influences, the Army of the Potomac at Chancellorsville, is Jackson makes that turn right at what's labeled the Catherine Furnace on the map. He is passing something in the vicinity of a 1/4 mile to a 1/2 mile in front of Sickles' line. In Birney's division in particular, Birney's got spotters and trees and skirmishers out in front who see Jackson's column moving past them. And this is going to have huge implications both on Sickles and ultimately on the outcome of the whole battle.
So is Jackson doing it that close in order to be seen? Because I don't think so. Very close.
It is. Now again, like many things, you look at a flat map in a book and you go, "Oh my God, the blocks are moving right by the other colored blocks."
It is the wilderness.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
So when you get out there, obviously with the trees and the such of the wilderness, makes a huge difference.
But he is spotted.
Yeah, because I was going to say, having said that, right and around that line from Catherine Furnace, going up to the Third Corps line, there is a gap and an opening. And so, yes, he is spotted. As cagey as I might like to think old Jack is, no, I don't think he's doing that on purpose. I think, they're making use of the best roads that they can. But yes, he is spotted. And so Birney, division commander in the Third Corps, and again, Birney, he's here. Birney is at the Peach Orchard and such, at Gettysburg. So you have a lot of the same names, a lot of the same players. But Birney, by about, 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock on the morning of May 2nd, will start reporting up to his chain, up to Sickles and Hooker, saying, look, the enemy is passing by in my front. They're passing by. Sickles will come out kind of to Birney's zone and kind of take a look around, and Sickles and his guys seem to come to the conclusion that with the enemy passing in front of us and we can see some wagons and stuff of that nature, they seem to come to the conclusion that the enemy is retreating. All right. And that's going to have, again, big hurt, big impact on the, on what happens.
So, okay. So now, so Birney sees all this, sends word back to Sickles,
Right.
who's at headquarters with Hooker.
Yes.
But they're down looking at Howard's line, aren't they?
Yeah, so they're on a morning reconnaissance that morning, and you're right, they're kind of riding the lines looking at other stuff. So it takes a while to get to Sickles and Sickles to come to Birney. And so, time is passing, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 10:30. Time is passing in the morning, and obviously with each hour that passes, the head of Jackson's column is covering another couple of miles.
All right. So then the whole controversy over Hazel Grove.
Yeah.
Now, it's been a very long time since I've been down there. So I'm sure I don't remember where this is, although I'm sure I've been there as well. But it's essentially in front of the crossroads, like the Chancellor House, isn't it?
It is. It's about, give or take, it's about 1,700 yards or so. And again, even if somebody's looking at that map,
We can go back to the map here, Court.
Hazel Grove is kind of about 1,800 yards or so northwest of the Chancellorsville house, give or take. I just looked at that on Google Earth today to get the measurement. So it's give or take about 1,800 yards away.
So again, we're looking at a flat map.
Yes.
Tell me, when you're not on a flat map, what are we experiencing when you're out there? What does it look like? And what can you see today from there?
Yeah.
And what could they see back then?
Yeah, so while we know what we can see today, we can speculate on what we could see back then. But what you can see is if you are in Hazel Grove today with a path of cleared trees, basically going all the way down from Hazel Grove down to the Plank Road, you could at the time basically get a good field of fire into much of the Union position at a farm along the pike called Fairview, and then into the Chancellor House beyond that. So the idea is if the Confederates occupy Hazel Grove, which they don't at this point in our narrative, but if they do occupy Hazel Grove, they've basically got a clear artillery shot down into much of the Union line. It is, to Lentz's question, it is somewhat similar, no two battlefields are identical, but it is somewhat similar today to standing up on the Peach Orchard and looking down towards Cemetery Ridge and Hancock Avenue. There are some similarities there.
If you have a question for Jim and you don't want to contribute to our budget for the show today, that's fine. You can make a phone call. What's that?
I said you're dead to us if you don't do that.
You're dead to us, right? You can make a phone call. 717-420-1978 is the number, and you can ask Jim directly. We're going to take calls throughout the show today since we're kind of doing it a little differently. Okay, so now, what happens, though, to Sickles at Hazel Grove that people are saying, oh, he's got it fresh in his mind at Gettysburg?
Well, so what happens is, I'm going to go back to May 2nd for a minute, because we kind of left Jackson's flank march.
We did.
Kind of dangling, and that's okay.
That's my ADD.
No, that's okay. It's all right.
Thank you.
But how it then ties into Hazel Grove, as we all know, very much the story of Chancellorsville is Jackson will come around, will strike Oliver Howard's unprepared flank, drive in the Union right flank, and basically crush the right flank of the Union line on May 2nd. Sickles and the 3rd Corps, occupying that Hazel Grove area, will hold on to the Hazel Grove area through the night of May 2nd, when much of the rest of the Union line collapses. So that on the morning of May 3rd, when the sun comes up that morning, and Hooker, probably feeling totally shell-shocked and shellacked from the May 2nd beating that he gets, Hooker comes to Sickles early in the morning on May 3rd and says, okay, bub, this Hazel Grove, I'm going to kind of try to demonstrate for the camera because we're visual learners. But this Hazel Grove is now kind of a bulging salient. There's that word again, a bulging salient, in front of the main Union line. Hooker tells Sickles to come out of Hazel Grove. Well, now my hands are kind of waving all over the camera. But Hooker tells Sickles to come out of Hazel Grove, come back into the main Union line. And yes, folks, Dan Sickles at Chancellorsville is a rule follower, and he obeys Hooker's orders. He exits Hazel Grove. He comes into the main line, and what happens? Edward Port Alexander comes in with something like, 28 guns or something like that behind him. Charles Graham's brigade, who will fight at the Peach Orchard 2 months later, they're a rear guard. They almost get overrun, but the Confederate batteries come into Hazel Grove behind them and start bombing the heck out of the Union position at Fairview, along the Orange Plank Road and Chancellorsville.
And Sickles says, I'm never following orders again.
You might wonder.
See what happens when you listen to your boss.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
This is my point.
And this is why you can't work for somebody else.
That's right. Because nobody wins listening to their boss. Okay. So, all right. So he is embarrassed by this. You know what? Let's go. There's a point where Hooker has a council of war with his corps commanders.
Yeah.
How does that go? And does it play into everything that we're talking about here?
Well, it does. It's different than Hazel Grove, but it does, in my view, have an impact on Sickles and the 3rd Corps, Chancellorsville, ultimately to Gettysburg. And I didn't mention this, but for anybody, when I think of the two battles, Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, right? Because you always hear that cliche, to understand Gettysburg, you got to understand Chancellorsville.
Right.
And it's true, but a cliche is a cliche, but this is true. But if you think about it, when I think about it, the only Union infantry corps that are on the front line at both of those battles, and I mean front lines, is the 3rd Corps, the 11th Corps, and the 12th Corps. At Chancellorsville, the 1st Corps, the 2nd Corps, the 5th Corps, through no fault of their own, but through Hooker's fault, really don't do a lot. And then Sedgwick and the 6th Corps is a whole other hot mess. Hot mess of their own. But you've got the 3rd Corps, the 11th Corps, and the 12th Corps on the front lines. And, of course, we're talking about the 3rd Corps today. So there's a lot of impacts that do play into Gettysburg. And back to your question, this Council of War. So this Council of War comes in May 4th, which is the day after the Hazel Grove debacle. And Hooker calls all the commanders together into his tent and says, look, and Hooker, as probably most of you know, has gotten clunked in the head with a pillar. So he's probably a little doozy and suffering from a concussion. But he has this Council of War. He calls everybody together and he basically says, okay, are we going to stay or are we going to retreat back across the river and call it an end of a campaign? It's put to a vote. And again, folks, here we go. Gettysburg, not the only councils of war. Here's a great example of one in Chancellorsville. It's put to a vote. Most of the generals, if my memory serves, seem to vote in favor of staying or advancing. But Dan Sickles, and I think Darius Couch, if I remember, might be the other one who votes with him. They vote in favor of falling back, which is, of course, what Hooker really wants to do. So you have this thing going on. It then shows up in the newspapers that, Hooker wanted to stay and fight, and all of his weak subordinates, including George Meade of the 5th Corps, voted in favor of a retreat. Now, we love George Meade. He's a good,
solid commander.
Solid guy. George Meade, though, is not the kind of guy who's going to take that slight standing down. Why, Margaret? He starts writing home. Why, Margaret?
Right.
This is a base lie. I voted in favor of fighting. And that sort of thing. And so what Meade does is he starts polling the other corps commanders. Reynolds, John, you were at that meeting. How did I vote? He kind of is going around the horn getting votes. When Meade comes to Sickles and says, Sickles, my man, tell me, how did I vote? Sickles is kind of like, well, I think you did kind of vote in favor of retreating. And of course, this ticks Meade off. Meade and Hooker are ticked off at each other. Meade says to his wife, my God, I am at open war with Hooker. And what I think, and I know this was not a short answer, but hopefully an entertaining one, what part of what this does, back to your question, how does this impact Gettysburg? In my opinion, it adds strain to the Meade-Sickles relationship, which to me is the whole heart of why this FUBAR on July 2nd happens. Strain, miscommunication, two guys who don't like each other, like you and I once disliked each other, right before we came together.
Before we became friends.
Yes.
Before we realized we have more in common than we have whatever the opposite of common is.
More unites us than divides.
It's bizarre. I can't think of any other examples in this war or any other war that I've studied where two people that are, one is the direct commander of another, isn't really in control of his subordinate, or didn't seem too bothered by what he was doing over the course of a few hours that something wasn't done about it. It's their relationship's very bizarre.
It is. It's complex. It's nuanced. And I know we're kind of getting off topic, and I'm okay with that if you guys are okay with that.
Sure.
I was on the battlefield one time, the Gettysburg battlefield, not the Chancellorsville battlefield, where, I heard, and I'm not going to say who it was, but somebody interpreting to a group, and Sickles told Meade to go to hell, and he went to headquarters and said, go to hell, and giving his crowd this impression that it's just like, Sickles coming into headquarters and flipping Meade a couple of birds, and, hey, I'm off to Canada, and, here we go kind of thing. But, to your point, Mike, it's more nuanced. It's more complex than that. And you're right. It's a complex relationship.
It is. It's, it's one of those probably like here at Gettysburg, there were the ghosts of past eye rolls,
Yeah, right.
And, it's hard. I get that the personality conflict is going to play into things for sure, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense. It plays into everything all throughout life. But do you think that here at Gettysburg, and I know we're jumping around here, but at Gettysburg here, do you think Meade is ignoring Sickles's requests, or is he just so busy that it's something, it's like, I'll get to it later, and, no. And just because he's in the middle of other things.
Yeah. No,
what is that about?
That's a fair question. And I think, and look, there are people who think I'm a Sickles apologist. I'm drinking the Sickles Kool-Aid. And I really feel like if you think that about me, you haven't read anything I've actually written. Sometimes we get a little more sensational on podcast type appearances or that, to kind of tweak people, who we know get torqued off by this stuff.
Yes.
But, when it comes down to the serious stuff in writing, we try to keep it serious. And to answer your question, no, I personally do not think Meade is ignoring Sickles. I do think he's got a lot on, Meade has got a lot on his plate. He's, we've gone through, everybody knows this, he's new to command. He hasn't had a lot of sleep. He's under great stress, et cetera, et cetera. I do think at that hour of the morning on July 2nd at Gettysburg, I do think Meade thinks the action is probably going to be somewhere else and not along Sickles' front. And therefore, Dan, come on, Dan, just shut up and go take that position. Because I think in part, everybody kind of thinks the action is going to be somewhere else. Now, that's a fatal mistake. It's nearly a fatal mistake. It was a fatal mistake at Chancellorsville because there's a very similar situation then going on at Chancellorsville, where people are kind of like, Howard over here is away from the action and the enemy's retreating. And, it kind of is one of the excuses for Howard not fortifying his position. So there is a parallel there between Chancellorsville and Gettysburg. But no, back to the question itself. I don't personally think Meade is intentionally ignoring Sickles.
I mean, I think one of the things when we study history today and we look at that map, like you said, how clean a map looks compared to being there and, communicating how they communicated. You can't just radio someone. You want to speak to General Meade, you need to either send someone to find him or you need to physically be there himself. He's a busy guy running an army. And like Sickles, people say, oh, Sickles is stupid. He's an idiot. You have to be highly intelligent to be in command of a corps by July of 1863. Now, compared to your peers, you may not be the superior.
Right.
Or your colleagues, as some would say. But he's a highly intelligent person as well. So they're busy people. They're doing things. I could understand where Meade is a little... Do you see any passive aggressiveness in sending Hunt? Like kind of one of those, like, all right, let's get the mosquito out of my ear. Here, take this.
Yeah.
This should satisfy you.
Yeah. Well, starting along that line of thinking, the one question that I get a lot related to this sort of whole exchange is, people say, Jim, do you think there's any hidden meaning with Meade sending his kid to go talk to Sickles, that first exchange in the morning? And I get that question a lot. And, again, do I think there was any hidden meaning to basically sending your least experienced staff officer to deal with your most problematic subordinate? I tend to think not. As you termed it, passive aggressiveness. But in hindsight, you probably should have sent somebody more experienced, a Dickinson or somebody who might have had the stones to kind of say, okay, Sickles, you say you don't know where you need to be. This is where the boss needs you to be. And I don't know sending your kid is the right guy to do that. So I think that's a problem. But getting to the Hunt thing, I mean, that's an interesting dynamic. Because if you think about it, right, Sickles goes to headquarters at 11 o'clock on July 2nd. Says, General Meade, can you come? Can you come down? Nope, sorry, too busy. General Warren, can you come? No, sorry, too busy. Yeah, and then you have this scenario with Hunt where Hunt's kind of probably like, I'll go. Because, I think, too, if you sort of, the whole back history with Hunt, he was in favor, then he was out of favor, and then he's in favor. I think Hunt in general is a guy who's going to be as much of, hey, give me something to do, give me something where people, I think Hunt's as much of that as possible. So, passive aggressive, maybe not passive aggressive, but I do think it is probably a little bit of that, okay, got Sickles out of headquarters. He's not buzzing in my ear anymore. All right, let's get down to the real stuff. I think there might be some of that going on.
So when Chancellorsville is over, how's Sickles feeling? And what's going on between him and Hooker? Are they buddy still, or is he pissed at him? What's going on?
They seem to be. I don't know if there's a lot of direct writing and such about the relationship during this period, but when everybody, for example, and Sickles, for example, testifies at the Joint Committee of the Conduct of the War, and both Chancellorsville and Gettysburg kind of get brought into play, Sickles doesn't seem to be blaming Hooker for anything that happened in the Chancellorsville campaign. It's the 11th Corps' fault. It's the fault of somebody else not coming up here in support. Things would have gone better on May 3rd if Hooker hadn't gotten clunked in the head. So we know from the record that Sickles is still very supportive of Hooker. Now, Sickles says he suffers a wound of his own at Chancellorsville. And it's not really clear what this is, but he says something to the effect of, I suffered a contusion which impacted my health greatly. And so 3 weeks, he says, I think 3 weeks after the campaign ends, which would put you into mid to late May, about 3 weeks, I requested and got a leave of absence. and I didn't come back to the Army until June 28th.
Right.
So a lot of the stuff, that then is going back and forth between Hooker and Washington, in mid-June and late June, Sickles isn't necessarily around for that. He's back home. When Sickles comes back to the Army on the evening of June 20, or on the morning of June 28th, when he comes back to the Army on the morning of June 28th, night of June 27th is what I was trying to say. But when he comes back to the Army, he is on the train with the guy carrying the order relieving Hooker.
Yeah.
And it's sometime in the morning after Hooker is relieved, Hooker goes into Sickles' tent and they have what seems to be a very friendly conversation. Hey, I've been relieved. I think you should still stay and stuff like that. So you piece all that together, and I don't see any indication that Sickles has torqued Hooker for, anything that happened in the Chancellorsville campaign.
Is there any evidence that you're aware of? Because again, Sickles never wrote down anywhere that we know of. I was thinking about what happened at Hazel Grove, so I moved forward. So he didn't say anything like that. And as far as we know, he never spoke it to anyone who then wrote it down in a definitive manner.
Exactly.
But in your mind, and all the research that you've done on Sickles at Gettysburg for the book, Sickles at Gettysburg by James A. Hessler.
Thank you.
What's your feeling on it? What do you think he's doing there?
Yeah, I think.
Do you think Hazel Grove has anything to do with it?
I do think, coming back, I do think Chancellorsville has something to do with it. And, going back to our earlier comment, we are dealing with a guy, Dan Sickles, who does not go quietly into the night. There are years and years and years of newspaper interviews, congressional testimony, veteran reunion speeches, and things of that nature. And what he pretty much always seems to say, the memory of Chancellorsville that stayed with him, and this is why I kind of went back to May 2nd and Jackson's flank attack, the memory that seems to have stayed with them was the idea of Jackson bouncing out of the woods onto Hooker's flank. I'm sorry, onto Howard's flank. Well, Hooker's flank, but you guys know what I'm saying. Howard's line too. The memory that seems to stay with him is Howard getting outflanked. And, oh, Jim, come on. It's there again and again and again. New York at Gettysburg, folks. Read every one of those monument dedication speeches. That seems to be the memory of Chancellorsville. And that's why I think, this idea of, the north end of Little Round Top today, Sedgwick Avenue, before it kind of transitions into Hancock Avenue, that idea of getting out of Sickles's hole, he called it a hole, we call it Sickles's hole, but that low ground, that crappy defensible ground in and around the George Weichert farm area, and again, where Sedgwick's statue is today, that seems to be the memory. I wanted to get out of this kind of ground and get up in front of the enemy. And folks, I know somebody out there is saying, it's the wrong decision, Jim. Yeah. I get that. I get that. We know that in hindsight. But I really think that is what he is thinking. I really do. Because they say it again and again and again and again and again for 50 years.
And just as easily as Sickles staying there would have been a great thing, it could have been just as easy as him being stagnant there, even on his left on Little Round Top, that they would have just gone around.
Yeah.
Now I know that their plan wasn't to do that, but, when you're looking at everything from hindsight, well, it's like you said, it's what would you have done knowing what he knew?
Right.
And I think, like what Jim said, standing on the ground, going out where that Weichert farm is, or the Trossel farm, and then if you walk out to the peach orchard, I can see everything in front of me.
Yeah, right.
I know defending it, he doesn't have enough men, but if you have enough men there, it's probably a better position than where he was.
Observation, fields of fire, room to maneuver. I mean, it's there.
Do you think it was a better position than where he was? Because I was out there today.
I'm with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think parts of the position that he took are better. Parts of it are also worse.
Yes.
Yeah.
What would be the parts that are better?
I think as you get closer to the peach orchard, but when you're
Why isn't the audience seeing you, Courtney? They want to see your sparkling eyes. There we go. Okay, go ahead. Now, as what?
As you get closer to the Kadori barn, unless you advance forward a bit, you can't see much. I don't know that you can see like materially more of your open front than you could from that similar position back on Cemetery Ridge.
Correct.
And when you're standing, last night I was walking around Excelsior Field in that area.
Excelsior.
Yes. I'm just not sure that. What's the visibility there when you look at the far tree line
At Excelsior Field?
Well, once you crest up onto the ridge there, Sickles line, the visibility is what, a half a mile?
Is it even that?
Is it even
to the tree line?
Yeah. I mean, the difference being, if you're up on the ridge, if you're up on the Emmitsburg Road Ridge, you are seeing the enemy's position. And I think, and again, I'm trying to play psychology here a little bit, but I think again, going back to that idea, if we're back there, we don't see the enemy until they're right on top of us. So in Sickles' mind, his warped, twisted, diseased mind, but in Sickles' mind, the idea is if we can get out there, we can see them, and we won't be surprised because we can see them. I think that's kind of what's going on there.
How to use other people that were there and thinking, how did the Confederates see that? They saw that as an opportunity, right? That platform, that peach orchard, that's where they wanted their guns.
That is a whole premise, particularly of my third book, Gettysburg's Peach Orchard, the one I did with Britt Eisenberg.
Yes.
Because, folks, we got to remember, what is the Confederate plan of attack? And I see so many people say, oh, well, the plan of attack was to attack up the Emmitsburg Road, and if Sickles is back in Meade's position, they'll attack up the Emmitsburg Road, and they'll get their flank and their rear. No,
they won't.
No. The goal is to envelop and drive in the Union left, and so that's going to be dependent on where the Union left is. The Emmitsburg Road is referenced as a point to be gained, to gain the Emmitsburg Road, to use, I'm talking from the Confederate perspective now, to be used for our artillery in assaulting the Union position beyond. So, if Sickles is back there, back in the desired position, Longstreet still has to find the left, and that's what he's going to strike and drive in. So yeah, back to your point, right or wrong, and again, we know, because we've talked about this on tours, talked about this in writing, we know in hindsight that ground does not help Robert E. Lee win the Battle of Gettysburg.
Right.
But at the time and in the moment, it absolutely was an opportunity and a position that the Confederates were hoping to grab. In my mind, it absolutely is.
717-420-1978 is the number to call if you want to talk to Jim Hessler, our guest, about Sickles and Chancellorsville influencing him here at Gettysburg. And those of you who call in early have a leg up on everybody else. Get it? But wait, I have a caller. Caller who's been waiting here very patiently. The great Six Questions Lens.
Oh, of course.
Mikey, what's going on?
Long-time listener, first-time caller?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
78th time
First-time caller, long-time listener.
Yes,
right? Yeah.
right. How you doing, Mike?
Well, doing well. Hello, gentlemen, and Matt. And so I have a question about the impact that Chancellorsville had on the Third Corps. What impact, from a casualty perspective, from an organizational structure perspective, did that battle have on Sickles' Third Corps?
Yeah, happy to answer that. So, good question. So this is part of the premise, the impact to Gettysburg. Because going back to what I was saying earlier, the heavy fighting that the Third Corps does at Chancellorsville, 4,100 casualties at Chancellorsville. And the Third Corps goes into Chancellorsville. The Third Corps goes into Chancellorsville with 3 divisions: David Birney, Hiram Berry, and Emil Whipple. Berry and Whipple are both killed, mortally wounded, during the course of the battle. So you lose 2 division commanders. Jean Revere, the commander of the Excelsior Brigade, he's court-martialed for taking the guys off the field, so he's out for a little while. So you need somebody new in command of the Excelsior Brigade. So you've got definitely a new command structure at the division level. After the battle, because of the heavy casualties, the 3 divisions are going to be consolidated down into 2, And with Berry and Whipple being out, we're going to need a new commander for this new consolidated 2nd Division of the 3rd Corps. And that person is going to become Andrew Humphreys, which I'm sure you remember from when I did the Humphreys Ask a Guide episode.
Absolutely.
But which is one of your favorites, but I know. But
It's one of the audience loves that one.
oh, do they love that?
Oh,
one?
yeah.
Well, thanks, audience.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Not the audience watching now,
a
but the
different
audience that watched then.
a better audience.
Yes.
Yeah, no. I'm in a bigger one. I
Yeah.
don't know what I'm talking. All right, let's come back to
Just
it.
stop digging your hole.
Yeah, I know, right? Humphreys. So Humphreys coming back as a division commander is a big impact. And to add sort of salt to the wound here, where is Humphreys coming from? He's coming from the 5th Corps. And coming from the 5th Corps, where he was a friend, a subordinate, but a friend and a compatriot of George Meade,
Okay.
who is having issues with Sickles in the 3rd Corps. So now you add this crazy
You
personal
add a babysitter in there.
crazy personal dynamic in of one of Meade's buddies is now commanding one of the divisions in the 3rd Corps. So huge impact. Losses, reorganization, bringing Humphreys in, the whole 9 yards.
And he's the only West Pointer in the entire command
The
structure,
command
right?
structure, right.
How about anything else, Mike?
Yeah, going to the engagement in the Pitzer's Woods. You were talking about what Sickles did on May 2nd, throwing out the skirmishers of Birney's division, finding the tail end of Jackson's flank march. What impact did the Pitzer's Wood engagement have in Sickles' decision-making on July 2nd?
Yeah, so what impact did the Pitzer's Wood thing have on Sickles' decision on July 2nd? Again, you mention it. Again, it's a lot of the same players, right? It's Birney, it's members of Birney's division, it's Hiram Berdan's U.S. sharpshooters doing reconnaissance work on May 2nd, doing reconnaissance work again on July 2nd. It's a lot of the same guys. So, the impact of Pitzer's Woods on July 2nd, and I love Mike. He knows the answer to the question. He's just he's throwing questions out here. The impact of Pitzer's Woods on July 2nd absolutely influences Sickles' final decision to move forward. And again, it's similar to the Chancellorsville scenario in that the recon party comes out of Pitzer's Woods and basically says, Sickles, General, you were right. The woods are filled with rebels and they're moving in your direction. Doesn't matter if those are Longstreet's guys. It doesn't matter from the Union perspective. All we know is Confederates are in the woods and they're coming towards us. The funny part of all of this, of course, is Henry Hunt, who had suggested the recon in Pitzer's Woods, had basically said, if the enemy is in the woods, I would recommend you not move forward because you'll be in between the lines, be hard to get support out here to you. And of course, when you are Dan Sickles, you do the opposite, right?
Yeah.
So he says, okay, I am going to move forward. And of course, moves forward to the Peach Orchard, the Emmitsburg Road, and the rest.
He might have just been hearing the
history.
echoes of the past with Hooker speaking to him,
Exactly.
saying, come on.
Exactly.
Just don't listen to it.
Yeah.
Echoes of laughter,
Don't listen to
past
those
laughter.
Don't listen to the voices in your head, folks.
No,
that's one of the
right.
lessons today.
That's right.
And-
Go ahead, Mike.
One more thing, and I think it was Alexander who said that the advantage of exterior lines, not interior lines, but exterior lines, was from a artillery perspective, is that you could focus in on one singular point from two different directions.
Yeah.
And so kind of like the Peach Orchard,
Yeah.
as well as Hazel Grove to a certain degree, affords that exterior line into a singular point.
They do. Sorry.
There are similarities there.
Yeah,
to a
and they
certain
do.
degree.
And Alexander in particular does talk about that at Hazel Grove. The idea that we could converge fire onto Fairview, onto Chancellorsville, not only from Hazel Grove, but then they move some batteries kind of around to the plank roads. So you're right. There's that converging artillery fire opportunity at Chancellorsville. There's the attempt to do that on July 3rd, particularly that idea to converge fire on July 3rd at Pickett's Charge, which again, we know in hindsight is not successful, but they didn't know that at the time until after it happened.
6 questions. Thank you kindly for the phone call.
Thank you so much.
You have a good one. And it looks like we have somebody named Cancel on It's either that's the person's name, or they want us to cancel this episode. Cancel, you're on the air.
Hi, yeah, I was just calling. General question on Chancellorsville when Jackson's passing in front of the 3rd Corps, making his way around to the 11th Corps. Was there cavalry there, or when they were thinking they were retreating, did they send anybody out to say, oh, maybe they're not, or they just let them pass on by?
Yeah, no, good question. Eventually some of Pleasanton's cavalry does get brought into the zone, and start again doing some scouting to try to figure out what's going on. There are some indications that as the morning is progressing into the afternoon, some of these guys, such as Union cavalry, are starting to pass the word back to headquarters, saying to the effect of, hey, I'm not so sure that these guys are retreating. So yeah, there is some of that going on, but I think again, kind of this groupthink has taken hold at Hooker's headquarters, and this idea of my plans are working perfectly, the enemy is in flight.
Yeah,
I think it's a perfect example of people wanting to hearing what they want to hear, even when in some instances you're getting more and more indication and more suggestions that, hey, maybe this isn't what we think it is. Oh yeah, good question.
So was
about
the fallout after that? Was the fallout? I'm sure there was finger pointing after the fact. Was someone? What they think? 11th Corps didn't say it. A 3rd Corps should. I don't know enough about the battle, but
yeah. So that's a good question. So what was the fallout after Chancellorsville?
Yeah. So the fallout. The fallout after Chancellorsville primarily, as you guys probably know, primarily falls on the 11th Corps. It was the 11th Corps. Yeah. They were lounging around. They were playing cards. They had their rifles stacked. They're getting ready to cook dinner and that sort of thing. And everybody, and it's everybody, Sickles, Pleasanton, Hooker, the whole 9 yards, everybody pretty much points their fingers at the 11th Corps. And that's primarily the fallout. Within the upper commands of the Army, at a broader level, of course, you have these guys. You have these guys like Darius Couch, for example, saying, Christ, I'm not going to serve under Hooker anymore. So you do have guys in the higher command going to Washington and saying, look, maybe you want to put Reynolds in command, maybe you want to put Meade in command. So at the higher levels, there's fallout of guys saying, wow, we just lost total confidence in Hooker. But I think at more of a public level, this is where a lot of the finger pointing at the 11th Corps comes from.
There was oh, sorry. Go ahead. You have another question?
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind me following on to that,
go
because
ahead.
we're talking about fallout, a question we had earlier from the ghost of Sickles' leg was, if Sickles wasn't wounded at Gettysburg, do you think he would have been possibly charged with insubordination? Or if he could still stay in the Army, and I know it's impossible to know what that would have been, just based on how things ended up, what do you think would have happened with Sickles?
I think, you're right, this is a question that comes up a lot. I think, let me start by saying we've heard dogma from a lot of people over the years saying the fact that Sickles lost his leg saved his head. The basically that very premise. Yeah. Oh, he wasn't court-martialed because he lost his leg and that sort of thing. Again, if I read stuff at face value, and now I'm talking about what George Meade said and what George Meade wrote in the aftermath, I think personally, I think Sickles would not have been court-martialed. I think I'm going to take what Meade says at face value, which was up to a certain point. Hey, look, I thought it was an honest disagreement of opinion. And what people got to remember, at the end of the day, the Army of the Potomac wins the battle.
Right.
And it's probably not a great idea to go court-martialing all your generals after a victory.
For winning, yeah.
Sickles, we're going to throw you in the slammer. Hey, folks, what about Francis Barlow? Same thing.
Yeah.
Why don't we toss him out of the Army?
He invented the Sickles move.
Sickles just perfects the Barlow maneuver, right? So I think in large part because it's a victory, we're not going around, shooting insubordinate officers or throwing them in irons or that sort of thing. What I think then in this alternate universe, what I think would have happened is, okay, because Meade wants to reorganize the Army anyways. He's got guys here. he doesn't like. He thinks 7 Corps are kind of too unwieldy and all of that stuff. I think an unwounded General Sickles probably ends up going out west with the 11th Corps and the 12th Corps and all these guys. And I think that's probably what ends up happening in that fantasy world.
Like the idea that his wound saved him from a court-martial, but then as Chuck Crutchfield points out, he's in Georgia later.
Yeah.
Like, so it's not like he's not usable. So why would you not court-martial somebody if they truly did something wrong and deserved it?
Yeah.
Just because they're wounded, but then you'll also use that. You'll send that person out in the field and use them later on.
I think it kind of goes back to what I said too when I was answering that question. If you here's the thing. Traditional Gettysburg literature, and I know there's still a lot of my friends and colleagues and PhDs and all these guys who still think, Sickles is just on a vendetta ride to get Meade's head come hell or high water. I really think if you look at the correspondence from the fall of 63 into the spring of 64, what Sickles wants more than anything is to come back to the Army of the Potomac. And the vendetta ride exists, as I call it, to bring in a Wyatt Earp tombstone.
Yeah.
The vendetta ride exists after late October of 63 when Meade doesn't let Sickles come back to the Army. But if you go into the correspondence, what you see during this period is Sickles writing to Lincoln, visiting Lincoln on a fairly frequent basis and saying, give me something to do. My leg is, my stump is healed. I can walk on an artificial leg. Give me something to do. Had Lincoln assigned Sickles to a command, he might not even been hanging around Washington when the Joint Committee of the Conduct of the War started. But the Gettysburg testimony phase of that started. But because he doesn't have anything to do yet, I think that's one of the reasons why he can focus on Meade, and maybe that'll help him get his job back.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Anything, another one you want to add there, Mike?
Yeah, since we're in fantasy world and putting yourself in Sickles' perspective, the question was, looking at hindsight, do you think Sickles would rather redo Chancellorsville or Gettysburg? Which one's he hitting the redo on?
Which one's he getting the redo on? Ooh, good.
I'm going to say Gettysburg.
So here's the thing, and again, I'll be guilty of taking Sickles at face value. Reporters 25 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, probably not 50 years later, because he's kind of probably a drooling kind of vegetable at that point. But as long as Sickles was in a position where he could defend himself, Sickles repeatedly said, I do not regret anything I did. I'm mighty proud of the part that my 3rd Corps took in the fight, and if I could do it all over again tomorrow, I would do the same thing.
Right.
That's what he said. No, oh, come on, Jim, really? That's what he said, whether we want to believe it or not.
Even with the missing leg.
Exactly. And so then you say, well, okay, then would he take Chancellorsville back? Maybe he would take Chancellorsville back because you do, when you read the accounts of Chancellorsville and the aftermath of that, not only from Sickles, but from guys like Regis de Trobriand, who lived through both battles, you get a sort of sense of melancholy about just the huge casualties we suffered at Chancellorsville. So you could argue there is some sort of, hey, I would take that back. At the end of the day, I'm going to say Dan Sickles is a man who lives with no regrets, and he would take neither one of them back. That's my answer.
And that's R-A-G.
Yeah.
Ruggerts. Yeah, I guess, and also the missing leg, I bet you he didn't miss it too much, and I'll tell you why. Because it's a visible reminder of what he gave for the country,
Got it.
Or so he could say.
Exactly.
And a man like Sickles is an opportunist, right? And he sees an opportunity there to embellish his story. Not really embellish it, but embellish his sacrifice. And almost as if it's more important than the arms and legs left on the field by thousands of other men.
Right.
And so yeah, I guess I could see why he had no regrets, because he's a self-aggrandizer.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that's echoed through the rest of the Corps. So just from a smaller point of view, the 8th New Jersey guys, they're very proud of what they do at Chancellorsville and Gettysburg.
Right.
They're proud of how they fight.
Right.
And to be fair, the 11th Corps is as well about Gettysburg.
Yep.
So I could see Sickles, I think his core takes that, that gritty demeanor. It's us against the world.
Exactly.
They get, like the 8th New Jersey guys get sent out, I think, to the 2nd Corps. They keep all their 3rd Corps patches under their hats. They are a 3rd Corps to the end of the war.
You got it. And you see that. You see that in some of the post-Gettysburg correspondence. These West Pointers were going to do nothing, and our guy took them on, and all of that stuff. I think very much that gritty us against the world. These guys were. That's not to say everybody in the 3rd Corps liked Sickles. Everybody in the Corps did not. There are examples of guys who didn't. Not that I can think of any off the top of my head, but at the end of the day, the rank and file, they were proud to have served under old Dan.
Yeah.
They didn't care that he was a West Pointer. In their mind, again, doesn't matter what you and I think, in their mind, he was a game old fighter.
Yeah.
And that's what they liked.
Got another one there, Mike?
No.
Okay.
I can come up with one.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
There's
Okay.
been a lot of questions. It's not
No,
like
this is-
not
We
like
have
we're
one.
fishing for
I have
it.
one for later. I'm
Yeah,
trying to save
okay.
it for
Because
later.
that's why I asked you,
Yeah.
because I saw it. But we can save that one for later. Amanda's you're talking about, right? We'll save Amanda's for later.
That's about
later.
Larry's question.
I didn't see
from
Larry.
earlier.
Oh, okay. Well, very good. You're in charge of the questions.
We have Larry and Amanda on deck.
That's right. We've got some questions on deck. So here's what we're going to do then, Jim. Unless there's a way you want to tie this up in a neat little bow before we go to the break.
Okay.
Or we could do it after the break.
Why don't we do it after the break?
Okay.
It's kind of hot in here. Why don't we do it
It's
after the break?
very
we'll
hot
open the
in
door a
here,
little
and I want to
bit
fix
and get
Courtney's
some water.
microphone and all that other stuff.
Get my red Solo cup refill.
Yeah, there you go. So we'll be back in just a couple of minutes, so stick around. Don't go anywhere.
You can lead a horse to Rome, but you can't make him drink it. Call in and ask a Gettysburg guide. 717-420-1978. See you in a sec.
Well, I am a modern hero. My name's Paddy Carney. Not long ago, I landed from the box of sweet Killarney for the fight for Uncle Sam. He'll lead us on to glory, oh, he'll lead us on to glory, oh, to save the stripes and stars.
At Digital History Pioneers Foundation, we are about grassroots history on digital platforms. That means we are about podcasters, documentarians, YouTubers, and even TikTokers. All of these creators are out there trying to share their love of history with the public. They don't need ideas, they need funding, both from viewers and corporate donors. DH Pioneer's initial funding focus is on the Civil War era, with a special emphasis on the Addressing Gettysburg podcast. So be a vital part of the unique content Addressing Gettysburg has in store by donating at dhpioneers.com and help bring your love of history to the people. Digital History Pioneers is an IRS Section 501c3 approved charitable corporation that makes any donation tax deductible to the fullest extent of the law.
The Gettysburg Museum of History, located right here in the center of Gettysburg, PA. Owner and curator Eric Dorr grew up here and has spent his life collecting and preserving history through artifacts ranging from the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, World War II, presidential items, pop culture, and more. His museum is free and open to visitors Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 5 p.m., where you can stop by and immerse yourself in some of the most amazing artifacts that you would never believe exist in the middle of Gettysburg. If you're a fan of Band of Brothers and Everything Easy Company, you'll love his exhibit featuring the Dick Winters collection and artifacts from D-Day. You can even own your own piece of history by buying one of the many relics they have for sale in the museum and on the website gettysburgmuseumofhistory.com. The Gettysburg Museum of History is a non-profit 501c3 organization with a foundation that allows all purchases and donations to keep the museum operating and open free of charge. They have been featured on the History Channel, the Travel Channel, the Smithsonian Channel, and the Science Channel. Now you can check them out on American Artifact, the series on the YouTube channel, The History Underground. So that's the Gettysburg Museum of History at 219 Baltimore Street or the gettysburgmuseumofhistory.com.
If you like this podcast and what we're doing here, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much.
discharge date?
That's another great question.
Who can forget the sounds of the 60s?
The 1860s. I can't, and you can't either. Now, there's Marching Through Georgia, the exciting new album by Billy Webster. All of your favorite hits of the 1860s in one place. Such hits as Gary Owens, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, All Quiet Along the Potomac Tonight, Marching Through Georgia, and much, much more. So what are you waiting for? Go to billysongs.com and order your digital download of Billy Webster's Marching Through Georgia today. That's billysongs.com.
Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, Gettysburg's premier museum, is housed in the historic Lutheran Seminary building constructed in 1832, a witness to the first day of battle. The museum's 3 floors of exhibits connect visitors to the dilemmas that led to the Civil War, provide a powerful and personal view of the battle's first day, and explore one of the battlefield's largest hospitals. No visit to Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center is complete without a guided tour of the building's famous cupola, where on the eve of battle, officers and civilians saw thousands of Confederate soldiers' campfires burning to the west, and Brigadier General John Buford watched for vital federal reinforcements as fighting erupted on the morning of July 1st. Today, you can stand where Buford stood and discover how this view helped chart the course of the Battle of Gettysburg. Your trip to Gettysburg is not complete without a serious visit to Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, Gettysburg's premier museum. Purchase tickets online at seminaryridgemuseum.org or call 717-339-1300.
To get tickets or a cupola tour, listeners may call or walk in and mention address in Gettysburg, or by ordering online using the promo code AG1863 for 20% off.
Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. It began here.
There's a devil to pay.
When you're dragging ass out of bed and the hair's mussed up on your head, you picture the 20th Maine and you're happy once again. Fight the battle against being slow with little ground top, bro.
When you're dragging ass out of bed, the hair's mussed up on your head. You picture the 20th Maine, and you're happy once again. Fight the battle against being slow with Little Ground Top Bro.
Addressing Gettysburg's Little Ground Top by Bantam Roasters is available at 82 Steinway Avenue in Gettysburg or at addressinggettysburg.com/cafe.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
We're back.
Hey, Jimmy, have you heard of the Battle of Brandy Station?
I have.
You know, it is most widely known for the climactic action that took place on the important high ground of Fleetwood Hill. You know that, right?
I did, yes.
Well, preceding this was the initial Confederate defensive position that was hastily formed along the low plateau between the home of Mary Gee. Is it Gee or G?
I think it's G, isn't it?
G, it sounds right.
Yeah.
Spelled like G, like gee whiz,
Right,
you know. And St. James Church. This line was held by mounted and dismounted cavalry and 16 pieces of artillery and was important to protect Fleetwood to the rear. This tour, ladies and gentlemen, on June 21st at 10:30 a.m., it will give a brief look at the events leading up to this position, as well as what was going on at the time and afterwards, but focus on the specific area, including the Union plan and attack and the Confederate response. We will also discuss the players involved and their roles and responses throughout the battle. This is part of our Get Out of the Park tour season this year. Our great friend, 6 Questions Lentz, is going to be one of the guides there because he's a certified guide down at Brandy Station. And Tracy Bear is going to join him as well. We're calling it 6Q and the Bear. Yes.
Will there be an open phone line? Can we call 6 questions on the battlefield?
And
ask him
FaceTime him, maybe? Yeah, that would be fun. We'll see
that?
if we can get that. If there's a good cell signal, we can do it. Links to tickets. You have to get tickets for this one because we have limited space. So links to tickets are in the description. They're in the show notes right now. So you can go and click it and get yourself some tickets. Come out and explore the other battles of the Civil War with us. You'll be amazed at how you'll feel by exposing yourself to something other than Gettysburg. As much as we love it, it's good to expose yourself to some other things, and it's very interesting. So we'll see you on the field. Click the link in the description and join us June 21st. We'll see you then.
Super chats of $10 or more rise above the din in the comments section.
True.
Now that that's out of the way, let's ask a Gettysburg guide.
All right.
Here's Matt and the gang.
Thank you, T. Maximus. Okay, so we're back now. With Jim Hessler, we're talking. Did Chancellorsville have any influence on Sickles here at Gettysburg? Let's start with a super chat. You got a super chat?
We've got a super chat.
All right, go ahead, Mikey. What is that
It's a super question.
All
It
right,
came
go
from
ahead.
Amanda, and it's, did Longstreet ever comment on how Sickles' movements impacted his attack plans at Gettysburg, Mr. Jim Hessler?
Oh, great question, Amanda. Thanks for chatting that one in. Yes, Longstreet absolutely did. And one of the cool parts of this story is the way Sickles and Longstreet become friends in the post-war years. I think everybody loves these anecdotes.
Yeah.
You know, they kind of bury the hatchet and they become drinking buddies and attend reunions and that sort of things together. In the course of that, yes, Longstreet became an ardent defender of Sickles, just like Sickles would defend Longstreet. They would defend each other. Longstreet became a defender of Sickles, and when asked, Longstreet would essentially say that he thought Sickles' move forward to the Peach Orchard at Gettysburg, quote unquote, saved that battle for the Union cause. There was one instance, I want to say it's the 25th anniversary, where a news reporter specifically asks Longstreet to elaborate on that. And Longstreet says something to the effect of, well, by moving forward, Sickles cut down on my room to maneuver. Again, maneuverability is a thing. By moving forward, he cut down, he gave me less room to work with. I had to kind of adapt on the fly.
Yeah.
So again, sometimes people groan, oh, old Pete, tell me you didn't really believe Dan Sickles. Oh, but Longstreet literally went to his grave defending Dan Sickles. Folks, believe it or not.
So let's talk a little bit more about that whole thing, though, with them. Like, what I always wondered, what do you think that is? Like, what do you think is behind that? And here's where I'm thinking, because Longstreet, you know, at this point, right, he's not particularly a favorite of his former comrades.
Right.
Okay. He's what year was that when they had that whole drinking where he comes out defending him? Is that like over the course of many years?
Kind of like mid 1870s, you know, really up until Longstreet, literally up until Longstreet dies.
Wasn't there a picture or a sketch of Longstreet and Sickles together?
Yeah.
At a reunion,
holding hands.
Well, and Longstreet is actually talking to the reporters, like in real time.
There's
about Sickles or
yeah. There's at least off the top of my head 2, maybe 3 images I can think of, but at least 2 that I can immediately think of in my head, of Sickles and Longstreet as part of a broader group at reunions together. Yeah, it's not just like the 2 of them with their arms around each other, but
right.
But as part of a group. There's one that is supposed to be the 25th anniversary, which would be 1888, and the caption says Little Round Top. Now you can't see anything in the background to place it, but it says 1888 Little Round Top. 25th anniversary, Sickles and Longstreet together. So yeah, there's a couple, at least, like I said, at least 2 I can think of them at reunions together.
So is it Is it kind of like letting bygones be bygones, and all in the name of reconciliation?
Yeah.
What is it?
I think, and of course, the honest answer is we don't know.
Right.
I mean, at face value, Sickles uses, there's a quote where he says something to the effect of, it's surprising how much I like a man after I've fought him. Kind of like me and you in the opening shots of the Gettysburg podcast.
Exactly.
Nobody had to leave the country. We got it.
We got it. Yeah.
So I think there's that element of it. I think there's two old war horses
We have
literally coming together. Certainly I think the fact that one, Longstreet is, yes, not popular with many of his old colleagues. I'm sure he's looking for a home, so to speak. Sickles, of course, has his detractors in the northern side. So I think there's no doubt you have two controversial, polarizing guys coming together on that. So there's probably an element of that, and probably an element of, like I said, just two old war horses liking to swap stories. Probably a mix, I think, of a couple. That's my take anyway.
And
It's always nicer to reconcile and be friends with someone you used to hate, right?
But you'd also imagine the conversations they would have had, and again, it lends to what I was talking about earlier about you can't be an idiot and be commanding a corps by 1863.
No.
Is they probably had some... Sickles might have had a better military mind than we give him credit for. In the fact that they probably talked about it. And like I said, other people that were failure, Burnside gets, oh my goodness, the mud mark, right? But then he goes elsewhere and he's great. Hooker goes elsewhere and he's fantastic. Howard goes, and they're all fantastic. So who knows? It goes back to that question. I think someone maybe it was Jeff asked if he hadn't lost his leg, if he stayed in the army, that might have been a conversation between two very reputable commanders.
Yeah.
I touch on that a little bit. Something you'd said before, I was going to go down this road, and then for whatever reason we didn't do it. But I think you're definitely bringing up a valid point there, because we hear this a lot. That idiot Sickles, that guy was stupid. Here's a guy with a political career, a self-taught legal career, a diplomatic career. Now, none of them end well, but it's really more of an emotional intelligence, an emotional maturity issue that will often cause this stuff to blow up. And so, when I see somebody who's, kind of by modern standards, I'll say less than successful, and I don't want to offend anybody with a specific example.
Right.
But, when you see some of these people today, that guy was stupid. No, he wasn't stupid. You can argue, is he competent as a corps commander? That's a fair question and comment to make. I think Sickles is a Peter principle. And I think I talk about this in the book. Good at a brigade level. Had he had time to develop brigade, division, experience, okay, now we put him in a corps level. I think there's nothing in that guy's makeup that says he couldn't have gotten the job done other than the emotional immaturity level. But, again, what happens is you go through this late 1862, early 1863 period where he's basically going quickly from division to corps, and I won't go into all the details, but he's not participating in any battles in between, and I think that's the missing link.
Yeah,
a couple battles, commanding a division for a guy who I think could be a quick learner, could have made all the difference.
But I like your point here that he's not stupid, but the point that people who are not setting the world on fire are the ones that are always saying that.
Yes.
Right. And it reminds me, and I love this quote. I always refer to it, that Teddy Roosevelt quote about the doer of the deeds. It's not the critic who matters, but the doer of the deeds, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a whole big thing to it. And I never
sit on your biscuit, never have to risk it.
That's it. Exactly. That's what it ended with. And I always have to laugh at people who laugh at someone who's trying.
Yeah.
And like putting themselves out on a limb for something big.
Yeah.
That most people wouldn't even attempt to do. And the fact that he was self-taught and, those people tend to come off as a little more obnoxious. But I think if we're all honest with ourselves, and here's more psychology for you from Dr. Matt, if we're all honest with ourselves, we'll admit that it's because we're jealous that we're not doing what we don't have the nerve, because it's all nerve.
Yes, and that is absolute. There was literally, I know MJ the Major is watching right now. There was literally a meme on Facebook today. Now we're quoting Facebook of all places, the scholarly realm of Facebook.
Do we have to pay royalties if we talk about that?
But there was literally a meme to that very point. Haters hate you. Haters hate you. Haters
Why
hate.
are you pointing at me?
Well, no, I pointed to me too. Haters hate me. Yes, maybe even if haters hate you because you're doing something they wish they were doing.
Yeah, which is why you can't let them bother you.
You can't let them bother
because it's actually you actually should feel sorry for them.
Yeah, well, no, we won't
Really?
feel sorry for haters.
Oh, I don't know. I kind of feel bad for them. Well, that's why I feel bad for them.
Yeah. But you're doing stuff. Now, do Dan Sickles' haters hate him because they wish they're commanding a corps in the Army of the Potomac? I don't know. But he's out there doing stuff. He is making it happen. And look, I'm the first person to say, I just said it a minute ago, a lot of what this guy does in his life ends badly. But it must have been a hell of a fun ride.
Oh, he must have had a ball.
Must have had a ball.
Yeah. He had a ball. Everybody around him didn't, but he did.
You, I, his haters, most of us would kill to live this guy's life.
Yeah.
Maybe on two. I'd like to do it on two legs.
I would too.
Besides,
and it's just funny that everyone talks about how cocky he is after the war. If the whole battlefield is my
Yeah.
But you know what? That guy, he was there. He lived it.
Yeah.
We joke about losing a leg. That is a traumatic event. I mean, how many people? During that era, I lost my leg.
Yeah.
A lot of guys don't come back from that, and this dude's knocking on the door just a couple months later, like, get me in the field.
You got it.
Get me out there.
That's exactly right. 90 days later, folks, superhuman strength. He's back. Get me back out there, coach.
Well, and he's also later on is going to have an affair with Queen Isabella.
Oh, yeah.
Is it Isabella? Yeah. And who was the one in Matt Atkinson's lecture? It was like the Princess of Bulgaria or something.
Yeah, Matt loves that story.
Romanian?
There's a princess, and he buys Sickles, not Atkinson. Sickles
Right.
buys lion cubs for her kind of thing.
Yeah.
Atkinson A, loves that story, and B, always accuses me of not covering that story.
Right.
enough. Dude, I got like 95 years of good stuff. What do I care about? What do I care about lion cubs? But
he was very excited that he had one that you didn't.
I know he did. But your camera back on me, please. But it's important to Matt, so that's okay. Right?
Yeah,
So,
Matt Atkinson. yes.
Yes.
It's not important to me.
And now somebody's going, Matt, they're talking about
Yeah.
Get on. But yeah.
Well, if Hessler's got something to say, probably worth listening to.
Speaking of all the years of things you have to cover and do, we had a question from Larry Brown earlier.
Yes.
And it's a question for Jim. Any chance that you're masterful the first day at Gettysburg will be the first of a trilogy? Also, any plans for future LBH licensed battlefield
Larry,
LBG tours?
Larry, first of all, if you don't mind, thank you for watching our special about Jim's first day book when we answer that question. But go ahead, answer it again for us, Jim.
Yes, I'll be happy to. Yeah,
and thank you for the super chat. I'm just teasing you, Larry.
Yeah, and thanks, Larry, for the kind words about the book. So long story short, my first day book, which just came out a few weeks ago, was part of Casemate's illustrated campaign series. There was an assumption that having done the illustrated first day at Gettysburg, I would do the illustrated second day, the illustrated third day. But as we're getting older, a little more snow on the roof, life's too short to do things you don't want to do. Yeah. So I kind of said, gang, I'm not really feeling doing the illustrated second day. So we have negotiated that will be done by a friend. It's a name you guys would all know, but I'll let him announce it whenever he's good and ready. So a friend is going to do the illustrated second day. I might come back and do the illustrated third day. I just need a break. I don't feel, I've tackled the second day in the Sickles book. I tackled it in the Peach Orchard. I just didn't feel like tackling the second day again.
Well, and I've always, since we had that interview, have been encouraging you to do a Little Bighorn
Exactly.
book.
And there's an interest to maybe do illustrated Little Bighorn. So thanks,
but
Larry.
Super duper comprehensive, thick.
Yeah, not 130 pages.
No, I want a real big study on the Little Bighorn.
And I understand if I swing for that fence once in my life, I think I want to swing, and not just bunt. So I get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we'll see.
And
Thanks, Larry.
I think that field of study needs something new. I mean, I know there's been newer books since Son of the Morning Star, but I think
Yeah.
That to me, as far as I'm aware, that's like the last like really deep dive into it that was at least popular. Am I wrong on that?
The popular part, Jim Donovan's book, A Terrible Glory.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe, I have no idea what the sales numbers are. Maybe didn't quite achieve Mythic, Son of the Morning Star, but it was popular commercially, so I know there was that one.
Okay.
There's been other ones, and somebody listening will say, you forgot Fred Wagner's book, but I don't know that it's had the mainstream commercial success that a Son of the Morning Star had, or The Terrible Glory.
Son of the Morning Star is just a great title, but I think we need a Jim Hessler book on that one. I think everybody agrees with me
I
here.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
I was going to say, okay, only one per two people in the
I know.
studio clapping.
Mike completely ignored the
Mike
clapping.
Not a Little Bighorn guy?
I guess, Mike, you wanted to write the Little Bighorn book, and
Yeah,
you're
just can't
upset that
write.
you just can't write.
Yeah, you're talking about Little Bighorn. I thought you were talking about like Little Person. I thought it was a joke about me at first. I wasn't really listening.
You
Mike
weren't
is
listening.
short.
You were checking the messages.
Yeah.
But thanks, Larry, for the question. Appreciate that.
Yeah, like you should do it as big as like Hartwig's books. like I'm serious, like the Antietam books, like these two big tomes.
I know, my God.
telling
Could you imagine?
Well, you could do an entire book that big on just the lead up to the battle.
And the Rosebud and all that stuff. Yeah.
It's easy.
No, I'm
they
not
just
even-
write themselves
It's
these
easy,
days.
exactly.
Just use ChatGPT.
1,600
Right.
pages just come together like that. Yeah.
I think you should do it, and we'll keep bugging him. And ladies and gentlemen, whenever you see Jim, bother him and say, "When's the Little Bighorn book coming
I
out?"
appreciate it, because this is something I would want to do before I die.
Yeah.
So feel free to bug me.
Good.
Question of bugs.
There we go. Another one there, Mike. Anything?
I don't have anything else.
All right, very good. Well, Matthew Gillespie has one. He says, "Great perspective on the doer of deeds, Matt and Jim." So there you go.
Thank you.
So thank you for that, there, Matthew Gillespie. Is there anything else you want to add about this topic before we say sayonara to our lovely audience
I don't
tonight?
think so. I mean, hopefully 90 minutes on Sickles again. Hopefully we giving people a sense of, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. We are the byproduct of our past experiences. And to say that a guy's actions in July of 1863 were not influenced in any way, shape, or form by what happened to him in May of 1863, that's just not realistic. So.
No, I think that's the bottom line. We always say this on the show, and I'm sure we've said it on episodes you've been on. These are people at the end of the day,
Yes.
and 160 years is a blink of an eye in the grand scheme of time. And so human beings have not changed much in 160 years as far as our basic flaws and needs and desires and all that stuff.
If anything, they seem to be getting worse. So,
We're devolving, yeah.
I literally just said to somebody on a tour today, if you think about it, Dan Sickles is kind of tame by 2025 standards.
He's at least no worse.
He's no worse.
Yeah. He's 2025 for 1863.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's really no worse than the average 20-year-old today.
Today,
with all
you
due
fit
respect
right
to
in.
the 20-year-old.
Right. So I guess that's my closing thought.
All right. And then Mikey, anything you would like to add?
Nothing to add. I ththought it was fantastic. Jim,
thank you.
You're very charismatic.
Thanks.
Yeah.
At least one intelligent person was in the room other than me, which was fantastic. So that was different. But it was a nice change to have someone entertaining here today.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Hey, you guys know now that I'm have more free time, we just got to find more non-Sickles.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, there's plenty of those.
Yeah.
This is totally. Wait, I think there was a little more of Larry's question that Jim didn't answer, and I want to get that in for Larry. There was a second part. I want to just get that in. Something about Little Bighorn tours.
Yeah, he asked about if you have any plans for future Little Bighorn tours.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Larry. And again, apologies for skipping that part. Sometimes we get off on the tangents, and I'm as guilty of that as anybody. As this is airing, if any of you guys are out west, out near Wyoming, Saturday, June, I'm looking at my calendar real quick. I think it's June 13th. I'm going to put in a plug here, please.
That would be the 14th.
Yes, Saturday, June 14th, 2025. I will be at Fort Casper, Wyoming. Doing
I've been
a
there.
fundraiser. The fundraiser will be they are trying to put headstones for U.S. soldiers who died out west, and they're trying to properly commemorate them. And this year they're trying to do headstones for Custer's 6th Michigan Cavalry, the Wolverines. So I will be speaking for, if any of you guys are anywhere near that, come out and see me Saturday, 15th, June 15th, Fort Casper, Wyoming. There's going to be a ceremony in the cemetery in the morning, a nice dinner at night. I'm going to give a presentation about the 6th Michigan. So, Larry, that's as close as I'm probably going to get for this year. The problem they have right now at Little Bighorn is the park is closed 4 days. I think it's 4. Yeah, they're open. They're only open now Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at the Little Bighorn Battlefield because of work that they're doing at the Visitor Center.
Oh, right.
So
right.
because of that, we're not doing a major Little Bighorn road trip this year, but we might do that. Obviously, when they open it up again next year or whenever. But anybody who's out near Wyoming, Fort Casper, Wyoming, Saturday, June 14th, would love to see you. Come up to me in, of all places, Wyoming, and say, Jim, I heard about this on Addressing Gettysburg.
Yeah, that'd be a real trip.
And it's a great cause.
Are you flying in?
Yeah, we're going to fly.
So you're flying directly into, well, not directly, but you're flying into Casper?
Well, actually, we're going to fly into Bismarck, and we're going to start at Fort Abraham Lincoln, where the 7th and drive. And that was Wayne Motz's idea.
That's a great idea.
Jim, we've seen everywhere in Wyoming, so we decided we'd start there.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it is a good idea.
How far out of Casper is Fort Casper? Or is it not even near it?
I've never been there, so I'll find out on Saturday, June 14th.
I'm looking right now. It's just outside of town.
Just
It's really
outside of
close.
town.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's right there on the river.
Yeah, that is like pretty desolate out that way.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
So
It's
if we
John
bu-
Wayne country out there.
If I bump into Addressing Gettysburg listeners out there, we will know the reach and the power.
All the way to Casper.
All the way to Casper.
We're big in Wyoming, everyone.
We're big in Wyoming. Addressing Gettysburg. Anyway, that's all here for us, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. We had a very good turnout tonight. Thanks to you, Jim.
Thank you.
And Mikey, thanks for good job tonight, by the
Yeah,
way.
good job,
First
Mike.
time
All
doing
right.
these super chats. I like that addition. That was Mikey's idea, so thank you for doing that. Court Micker in the back there, thank you very much. Don't worry, we'll remember to record next time. At least I remembered early enough, Court, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one clapped for me.
No, you still tried, okay? Well, you still tried. Thank you. And by the way, I'll tattoo the checklist on the inside of your eyelids so that when you're sleeping, back there, you can go, oh, I forgot to hit record.
No.
No, I'm just teasing you.
Sleeping.
I'm teasing you.
Okay.
I know. No, we were both sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
2 tears in a bucket. I can't say the rest.
I don't know what you're saying. But listen, thank you anyway for that. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I really hope we do get to see you guys out there. Who wouldn't want to see the great 6 Questions Lentz giving a tour at Brandy Station? You never know. He might trip and fall, and then we'll have a laugh after we find out he's okay. But also, this is something that Mike is really good at.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to see him doing that. And it'll help him practice for his oral guide exam in September. So please join us out there. Don't forget the tickets are in the thingamabob there. Otherwise, that's it. I'm just stalling for when the announcer comes in because I forgot to hit this early on. Yeah. So, oh, there he is.
Ask a Gettysburg Guide is hosted by Matt Callery with Mikey B. Barisky, and Courtney Micker. Produced by Matt Callery and Courtney Micker. Guides appear gratis, but they would love for you to hire them for a tour on your next visit to the battlefield. To be put in touch with one, send an email to matt@addressinggettysburg.com. Thanks for watching.
Our hearts so stout have got us fame, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man forget shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, drink down